The morning before my flight to Denver, I stopped by my daughter's house with an early birthday gift. The moment I reached her door, I heard her crying, "Please stop. Let me go." I forced the door open and froze. The woman I'd called family for 4 years was covering my daughter's mouth, whispering, "Remember this clearly, you saw nothing." I pulled her off my daughter, and then Emily reached into her pocket and handed me something that changed everything. My name is Thomas Miller. I'm 68 years old. I built Miller Woodcraft from a drafty rental garage in Pasadena into a company with 300 employees and contracts across the West Coast. That morning I'd only meant to drop off a gift, my father's old watch, before my flight. The client meeting got canceled, so I turned the truck around and drove to my daughter Emily's house in Beverly Hills instead. I heard her scream before I even reached the door. Not a startled cry, a raw, choked sound of someone fighting to breathe through a hand clamped over their mouth. I threw the front door open hard enough to dent the wall, followed the sound down the hallway, and found Victoria Grayson, my son-in-law Mark's mother, pinning Emily against an armchair, one hand over her mouth, the other gripping her shoulder like iron. "Get your hands off my daughter." My voice came out flat and absolute. I pulled Victoria back hard enough that she stumbled into a bookcase, and then I watched something remarkable happen to her face. The ferocity drained out of it in 3 seconds flat, replaced by composed, faintly amused innocence, like a curtain falling into place. "Thomas, I know what this looks like," she said smoothly. "Emily's been under enormous stress. I was simply trying to calm her down." "That's how you calm someone down? By holding them down and covering their mouth?" Emily was trembling against my back. "Dad, please, can we just go?" I walked her out without another word to Victoria, got her into my truck, and sat there breathing while she shook beside me. Then she reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a USB drive. "I've been collecting things," she said, voice barely steady, "for months. Files, emails, records. Dad, I think they're trying to take everything you built." I need to explain what everything meant. 41 years of work. A company built from nothing after my father-in-law Gerald lent me money for my first table saw. My late wife Margaret had kept the books at our kitchen table every night for years, never once suggesting we quit. She died of cancer 4 years ago, and her last coherent words to me were, "Don't you dare let go of what we built. You promised me." Emily had taken over as CEO 3 years back, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely loved the work. Mark Grayson had come into her life 8 years ago. I'd never quite trusted him. Something about the way he listened at dinner like he was filing information rather than participating. His mother Victoria, a retired Manhattan corporate lawyer, had once asked me at dinner, almost casually, how founder-led companies typically handled succession. I'd answered without thinking and forgotten it by the time I reached my truck. Sitting outside Emily's house now, that memory landed differently. It hadn't been curiosity, it had been reconnaissance. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop right there in the truck. The first email stopped my breath. Mark to Victoria, subject line, Phase 2, ready to move. Emily had organized everything methodically. Financial records, correspondence, audio files, legal documents, all gathered secretly over 7 months, using only her personal devices. The financial records showed wire transfers, over $800,000 across 14 months, moving from a competitor called Apex Interiors through a Delaware shell company into a Cayman Islands account called GV Holdings, Grayson, Victoria. They hadn't even bothered to be subtle. The correspondence was worse. Mark and Victoria discussed my company's proprietary designs like inventory, discussed me like a problem to be managed. One email read, "The old man is still sharp enough to notice if we move too fast. Once Hale has the board secured and the medical documentation in place, we won't need to be careful anymore." Medical documentation. I sat with those words a long moment. The legal folder explained it. Victoria had hired attorney Richard Hale to prepare a filing based on an incapacity clause buried in our corporate charter, one that let the board remove a founder deemed medically unfit. Hale had spent months quietly convincing board members I was slipping, arranging a physician's evaluation based on second-hand accounts. If it went through, I'd lose my company without a single criminal charge ever being filed. then the audio files. Emily had recorded Mark and Victoria talking in her own home, voices carrying up through a floor vent. "She's going to be a problem," Mark said. "She's been poking around in the transfer records. Victoria? Then we don't give her time." They discussed the board filing, discussed how once I was removed, no one would listen to a CEO installed by an incompetent man. My phone rang. My assistant of 22 years, Sandra Kowalski, her voice shaking. "They just served papers to the board. They're saying you sold trade secrets to a competitor. There's an emergency meeting." I drove straight to the office. 9 board members sat in that room, and not one met my eyes. Mark had dressed for the part. Dark suit, no tie, rehearsed reluctance. Richard Hale presented falsified evidence, emails bearing my name, a bank account in Nevada I'd never opened. The vote took 4 minutes, 7 in favor of suspending me, 0 in my defense. I walked out without a word, sat in my truck outside the building with my name still on the directory 14 floors up, and felt something that wasn't despair. It was the quiet certainty of a man who knows the people trying to take what he built have made a serious mistake, because they'd moved too fast, and clean documentation always has seams. I called Daniel Ortega, a retired FBI financial crimes agent and old friend of 35 years. Over coffee at Santa Monica Pier, I laid out everything. He confirmed it was federal, wire fraud, trade secret theft, and said something that chilled me. He'd consulted on a similar case years earlier, involving the same name, Apex Interiors. "This is a system," he said. "Victoria didn't build it for you. She adapted it." His plan was simple. Let them believe they'd won. Emily kept collecting evidence from her personal devices only. Daniel started pulling the financial thread from outside. That night, I visited Sandra at home. She confessed, ashamed, that 8 months earlier she'd unknowingly approved a security upgrade to my private conference room. Cameras hidden in a smoke detector and light panel, installed using authorization codes generated from Mark's computer. Mark had since threatened her career if she interfered. I told her the people who'd threatened her wouldn't protect her when this collapsed, and asked for the company's IT access logs. She agreed to get them. Daniel and I spent that night going through them at my kitchen table. We found Mark had logged into the system remotely at 3:47 a.m., months earlier, and downloaded 47 proprietary design files. We also found something Daniel hadn't expected. A third account, smaller, consistent monthly payments for 19 months, routed to a firm called Parsons Technical Solutions. The registered owner was Kevin Parsons, our IT manager. Mark had recruited him too, and was clearly planning to let him take the fall for everything requiring technical execution. Daniel met Kevin alone the next day, laid out exactly how exposed he was, and how Mark had structured everything so Kevin's fingerprints, not his own, were on the technical crimes. Kevin went pale and signed a full cooperation agreement with the FBI that evening. Then Daniel told me something that stopped my blood cold. Kevin had once overheard Mark and Victoria discussing what would happen to Emily after the company was secured. Victoria's words, relayed exactly, she wouldn't be able to fight back, not permanently. There are ways to make sure of it that don't leave the kind of evidence that causes problems. I didn't go home. I drove to the old garage in Pasadena, sat on the concrete floor beside my daughter's name, pressed there by Margaret in wet concrete the year Emily was born, and let myself grieve for the first time since Margaret's funeral. Then I called Emily and told her to get out of that house. Mark had taken her car keys and was monitoring her phone. I told her one more day and I'd come for her myself. The next night I parked 2 blocks from the Beverly Hills house and knocked the old signal on her bedroom window, the same one we'd used when she was 14, sneaking out past curfew. She climbed out, shaking, and we walked to my truck at an even pace while a light went out in an upstairs window behind us. In the truck, the adrenaline broke, and she finally cried the tears she'd been holding for months. I drove her to Daniel's house, where he'd made up the guest room and had coffee waiting. That night she told us everything, how Mark had spent 14 months quietly isolating her, questioning her judgment so calmly she'd started doubting herself, convincing her I was controlling, cutting her off from her therapist. And how, the morning Victoria attacked her, Emily had just discovered draft conservatorship documents. A plan to have her declared psychiatrically unfit, complete with fabricated evaluation notes from a psychologist she'd never met. The next morning, the FBI called. Special Agent Rachel Torres told us the investigation into Apex Interiors was 8 months old already, tied to 7 confirmed victim companies, with Victoria identified as the consistent architect across all of them, recruiting insiders, arranging shell payments, neutralizing leadership through legal mechanisms. They'd had a wiretap on Mark's phone since June. He'd discussed the incapacity filing. He'd discussed twice ensuring Emily wouldn't be able to cause problems after the transition. Then Torres showed me a photograph. Victoria, with the CEO of Apex Interiors in a Manhattan hotel lobby, dated 2 years before Mark ever met Emily. The marriage hadn't been an accident. It had been a door, opened deliberately. Torres asked for 6 weeks, enough time to build an airtight case and arrest them at the upcoming shareholder meeting, where the FBI could be present without tipping them off. I agreed. I confirmed I still held 51% of founding shares, enough to schedule that meeting myself, and I spent the next 6 weeks playing exactly the confused, diminished old man they wanted to see. I arrived late to meetings. I forgot names. Sandra reported that Mark had asked her, with practiced concern, whether she'd noticed me slipping. She told him she had, and hated every word of the lie. Emily stayed hidden at Daniel's, working remotely, rebuilding herself night by night on our phone calls. Victoria began appearing at company events with quiet, satisfied confidence, certain the outcome was already decided. The night before the shareholder meeting, I went to my office alone, sat with an old photograph of Margaret on my desk, and told her I'd finish it in the morning. I put on the navy suit she'd picked out decades earlier, the one I'd worn to sign our first real lease, to her funeral, to Emily's promotion, the one you wear when things matter. Emily arrived at my house the next morning in a borrowed blazer, chin level, ready. We drove to the office together. In the 14th floor hallway, we passed Mark, Victoria, and Richard Hale, coming out of a side room. Victoria's composure faltered, just barely, the instant she saw Emily standing beside me, unbroken. In the boardroom, Victoria delivered her prepared case with rehearsed conviction. The fabricated emails, the fake Nevada account, a printed timeline of my supposed misconduct. Mark performed his reluctant sorrow beautifully. When she finished and called for the vote, I stood. "Yes," I said. "I'd like to share some documents first." I put up the real email chain, verified with metadata, the access log showing Mark's 3:47 a.m. download of 47 stolen files, the GV Holdings bank records, Kevin Parsons's signed cooperation statement. The room went silent. Mark's hands came apart on the table. Victoria's color drained. Slowly, but her posture never broke. The boardroom door opened. Special Agent Torres walked in with 2 agents. She read Mark his rights first. Wire fraud, trade secret theft. He looked at his mother, said one word, "Mom," and got nothing back. Then Torres turned to Victoria and added witness intimidation and conspiracy to the charges. As they cuffed her, Victoria paused at the door, looked at Emily, and said quietly, "She was never strong enough for this. She never was." "No," I said. "She's mine." The room was quiet after they were gone. Emily's hand was still locked on my arm and had not loosened once. The federal indictment ran 31 pages. Kevin Parsons received probation in exchange for full cooperation. Richard Hale's law license was suspended pending disciplinary proceedings. Apex Interiors was raided in December. Its founder's operation revealed to have targeted 7 companies over 4 years. Our stolen design files were recovered through civil court order by February. Emily filed for divorce 2 weeks after the arrest. During the proceedings, her attorney discovered Mark had quietly taken out a $2 million life insurance policy on her 18 months earlier, paid through the same shell structure as the Apex payments, with himself as sole beneficiary. Torres opened a separate investigation into it that she wouldn't yet discuss with me. I didn't need her to. I understood enough. 6 months after the arrest, I turned the old Pasadena garage into a small company museum. Emily's design, Sandra's archive. On a clear Saturday in May, Daniel and I stood in it together with 2 beers, the way we always had. Emily arrived with Daniel's 4-year-old granddaughter Lily, who wandered straight to the east wall and pressed her hands against the concrete where Margaret had once written our daughter's name. I took the velvet pouch from my jacket, my father's watch, The one I'd meant to give Emily that morning so long ago, and handed it to her. Inside the case, engraved 12 years earlier. To the one who carries it forward. She pressed it to her chest and broke, not with sorrow, but with everything a person carries when they've survived something and come out whole on the other side. Lily crouched by the letters in the floor and asked if I'd put her name there too. Yes, I told her, I will. I built something from nothing once, and I nearly lost it to people who mistook age for weakness and trust for stupidity. They forgot the thing every carpenter learns early: the older the wood, the harder it is to break. I am Thomas Miller, and this is my story.